Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the AgilQuest Workplace Leader webinar series. We want to thank you for joining us for lunch, and we know that you're going to find today's topic both insightful and interesting. GSA, the leader in workplace change within federal agencies, is here to tell us how they've made transformative workplace changes, what has led to those successes, and to share what to expect from them in the near future. AgilQuest is proud to be part of that story, and we want to thank the GSA innovators and workplace champions for taking their time to share their experience and expertise today. I'm sure everyone will want to get right to the presentation, so we'll make the administrative details quick. We'll be hearing from 4 GSA presenters today, and as usual, we've saved time at the end for your questions. So please use the Q&A facility on your WebEx desktop to queue up your questions as they come up. We're also going to be taking some polls today, so watch closely for your opportunity to answer those survey questions when the WebEx pop-up shows on your desktop. There's a quick reminder in here as well to watch your inbox for invitations to next month's webinar. The economic model of hoteling is our topic for March, and it's something we've been asked to share often, and we've scheduled this for the same time next month in March. So without further ado, we're going to hand it over to Tony Macri from GSA and the team for Smart Occupancy and Reshaping the Government Workforce Plus Workplace.
Thanks very much, Doug. Thank you all for joining, especially over for us East Coasters on the during your lunch hour. It's very appreciative, and for registering. Today, we're pleased to come to you with our conversation today and are grateful for this opportunity that AgilQuest has provided. AgilQuest is one of our strategic partners in our Smart Occupancy program. So today's conversation will focus on smart occupancy, how GSA is reshaping the government workplace and workforce. It's a really interesting intersection between the workplace design and how it affects workforce behaviors, productivity, collaboration, innovation, and so forth. So again, thanks again for joining us. Let me just go to the next slide. One of the things I like to do is try to make these webinars as interactive as possible. With over 250 registrants, it's kind of hard, so we weren't able to do webcam, for example. But one of the things we've learned throughout GSA's mobile transformation is that we really have to beef up our skills on virtual meetings. We spent years and years figuring out how to work in a in-person setting and in personal meetings, but now we've moved to kind of a virtual setting and virtual meetings. So one of the things we kind of guiding principles here at GSA is to always kind of train as we go along. So I'd like to share that best practice here with you. And one of the things we want to stress is how your screen is set up to maximize collaboration. So this is what your screen can and should ideally look like. What you want to have is, if you see this green bar in the center with a red blinking light, which means we are recording this, FYI, so if you missed something, we can come back. If you scroll over that, a drop-down menu will come down. With that, we encourage you to activate 3 bars: your chat, your participant list, and your Q&A session. The participant list will let you know who else is here on the call and what other colleagues you may have. There may be some names within this cadre of workplace and workforce experts. The chat, that's a really fantastic feature. I encourage all of you to maintain a chat with all participants throughout. So if I say something or another panelist says something that sparks your interest, feel free to continue on the chat there, and others can respond. So really, you're having a multi-dimensional conversation, and you're not just listening to me drone on, for example. And then the Q&A, that's how we're going to officially monitor Q&A. You can put that on the bottom right screen there. Doug Lucy has agreed to monitor that, so if you have official questions, you can go there, and he will queue those up for slots we have at that time. So I'll just take a second to arrange your window so you're maximizing. Again, this is to make sure we're having a collaborative, engaging experience and not just feeling that you're being sitting and getting information. Great. Well, I always like to start meetings with a purpose and outcomes. So our purpose, why are we here today? Why have you taken up your lunchtime to join us for this conversation? And 3 pretty clear ideas. One is to share GSA's workplace and workforce vision. Where are we going with the space of design and how, again, it affects employee productivity, collaboration, innovation, and so forth, as well as flexibility. And second one is to describe GSA's internal workplace and workforce transformation. So there are 2 things going on here. There's our internal work. So what are we doing internally to test out these processes and procedures and to demonstrate them? And the third bullet is to communicate GSA's Workplace Plus role. That's an internal project management office in assisting client agencies with meeting executive mandates and global workplace and workforce trends. Many of you are federal agencies here. The Workplace Plus PMO is being stood up to help you with the this mobility transformation that we're all observing. So the panel that you have here today is going to talk about our internal and external efforts. So that's why we are here. What we hope you get out of it. By 1 o'clock, we hope that you feel these 4 things have occurred. 1, a shared understanding of the case for smart occupancy and mobility practices. Why are we doing this? Why bother? Why invest? A shared increased sense of awareness of how financial, environmental, talent recruitment and retention, and employee productivity goals are enhanced by workplace and workforce practices. A shared understanding of how GSA's Workplace plus PMO can support client agencies with their own transformation, again, many of you. And most importantly, an appetite for what's ahead. We're hoping this that GSA is leading by example, that we are, our kind of motto is that we're going first, that with our mandates and so forth, it's giving our client agencies, in essence, the courage to say that we can do this too. Here's a model GSA's used, and through the Workplace plus PMO, this is how they're set up to support us. So we hope by the end of today you have further an appetite of what's ahead. So what I'd like to do real quick while I get my windows here up, in the participant window there's a little feature that looks like a little hand. Please raise your hand if this is what you expected today, if these were your expectations for today's call and what you hope to get out of it. Just raise your hand. I see Eric has raised, Amy, Pamela, Ron, thank you, mostly. We have Brooke, Sue Ritz, Steve, thank you. Kurt Seedling, thank you. Earl. Wow, it looks like we have 100%. Well, let's see. Fantastic, fantastic. I'm glad to hear that the design team here has been able to. Grant, thank you. Sally, thank you. Valerie Short, thank you. David Lewis, fantastic. Okay, I haven't seen anyone not raise their hand. David with Department of Energy, great. We have DOI, fantastic. Now, don't forget to unraise your hand as well. If you have other expectations, use the chat window to just put it in if there's something we missed on purpose and outcomes, and we will get to that. So today's agenda, we have a lot to cover. We're going to move really fast, so I apologize if I sound a little bit like a used car salesman at one of those commercials. We will define smart occupancy. What in the world is this new term? Where did it come from? We're going to present the case. Why are we investing? Why are we doing this? We're going to describe GSA's headquarters modernization project. Again, what are we doing to show as a showcase, as a model, to give other agencies the courage to do similar work? And lastly, we're going to explain GSA's Workplace plus PMO and how it's positioned to support our clients. Throughout it, we're going to solicit feedback, ask for input, and respond to your questions. My goal here is to make sure you don't drag off into email or another topic. At the end, you can tell me how well we're doing. So who's who? I'm joined by a great team of colleagues across the country. You're going to hear from them. I'm going to give a quick synopsis now, but then when they park up in their conversation, they'll explain a little bit more about themselves. I'm here in the room in Washington, D.C. It's Bob Stafford. He is the lead tenant solutions director for our 1800F project. That's our internal headquarters piece. So Bob will be joining us shortly. Over in Boston, Massachusetts, it's Sharon Wall. She is our regional commissioner for the Federal Acquisition Service, and she's also the Federal Acquisition Service's Workplace Plus PMO lead. And then in Chicago, Illinois, we have Charles Hardy, also known as Chuck. He's a workplace strategist and also the Workplace Plus PMO lead for the public building services. One of the things GSA has noticed about the project of mobility is that it's been able to align all the various parts of our organization. So we have our Federal Acquisition Services, which focuses on IT acquisitions, furniture acquisitions, and so forth, and we're joined with our public building services, which is the real estate. And when we put these two forces together, we're able to put together a great package on mobility. And then we have our internal, so we can pilot and see what works ourselves, and that's where Bob and I come in. So this leads me to my first poll. You're all obviously are experts in this. You sparked your interest. So what I'd like to do is just kind of gauge. I just want to do a quick SWOT here on where we stand with this. So I'm going to pull up a poll real quick. Many of you are familiar with the, let me just pull it up here, okay. Many of you are familiar with the idea, the innovation adoption curve. So I'd like to ask where you feel your organization, whether you're a federal government or private sector, fits on this curve when it comes to kind of mobility practices, smart occupancy in the workforce. So you're going to have just about 30 seconds. So let me open the poll. There you go. So please take a few seconds to add where you think you are, and don't forget to hit the submit button. I see 10 of you have finished, 16, 99, all right, we're moving quickly, great, we've got good. Don't forget to hit submit. There's 40 of you have not started, so if I can regain your attention to your screen, take the quick poll. There we go, we're moving. And again, these are good best practices as we move towards kind of a mobile piece. So a large part of this, of course, is the change management. And kind of training on the move is a way to do it. And there's a little bit of a different art to virtual meetings. All right, 5 seconds to go. All right. Well, let's see where we fell here. 1 second. All right. So this is what this is going to tell me, and this will be great feedback for our panelists. So we said about 15% of you say that you're innovators, 20% early adopters, 13% early majority, 18% say late majority, 8% laggers, and 25 of you didn't answer. And then we do have the responses here, but we won't go into it. This is fantastic news. I'm excited to see this, this adoption the way it is. It's really great. What I'd like to do now is, let me go back to, how do I go back? Oh, no, that's not what I want to do. There we go. What I'd like to do now is ask another question real quick. Get some feedback. Here we go. All right. So I'm curious to know, if you selected early adopter or early majority or innovator, I'd like to know why. What are you doing in your organization that is leading to that behavior? And I'm giving you a little bit more time there. So there you go. And you have 2.5 minutes for that. So just a quick headline. And again, don't forget to hit the submit button at the bottom once you put it together. And this is great feedback, and it'll help our, Bob, Sharon, and Chuck and I adjust our conversation depending. This is telling us many of you are earlier on the curve or more advanced on the curve. Just great feedback.
And Tony, this is Bob. I think it's interesting looking at the poll results, seeing how the number of respondents or the percentage of respondents fell pretty evenly along that curve, and that kind of mirrors the experience that certainly I was getting when I was having conversations with customers, and I'm sure Sharon and Chuck have experienced the same thing, where when we go out and talk to either industry or talk to our federal customers about their level of mobility, their ability to sort of manage their occupancy in a smarter or different way, we were hearing things that was all over the board. One organization would say that, yeah, we've adopted, a lot of forward-thinking technologies or attitudes towards the workplace, and others would be like, we haven't changed our attitudes about the workplace since the early 1970s, and we don't really plan to change them. So, so the results we're seeing from the poll, I think, mirror what our experience has been in the discussions we had, which is good.
That's exactly, and that was hopefully what we were about to see. So there's about 22 of you that have been in progress but haven't finished, so I just encourage you to hit submit. And 77 of you, 76 have not started, so I'm assuming you're on the later part of the curve, and we'll get to you as well in a minute. But we just want to hear, basically this is going to tee up the conversation about what's driving this. What do we have going for us? About 4 seconds remaining. And the 16 of you that haven't submitted, just feel free to submit what you have. I'm just giving the computer 5 seconds to do its thing. All right, so let's see what you all told me about why this is working so well. So we're hearing that organizational culture supports innovation. That's fantastic. Mobile work is widespread in my company. Flex work schedules, virtual training, and learning systems are in place. Rolled out alternative workplace strategy in multiple locations. Implementation of workplace transformation at headquarters. Organization is looking for change. As GSA, we develop people counting devices. We like to be on top of change. Small agency with younger staff, willing to try new things. That's important. Because we're a leadership department in the government of Canada. Welcome, Canada. Exciting to have you here. Slow but moving phased approach from old to new. So it sounds like there is just a comfort with change and modernization. It also sounds like, if I can synopsize this real quick, there's comfort with, Juanita, what did you see that's making you laugh there?
Virtual adjacency.
Virtual adjacency. Clear on positions. We provide workplaces for our employees and customers when they need it, and as they need it, they will. Okay. Well, great. This is something I will save, and maybe AgilQuest can share back with you. We won't attribute it, but just to kind of some of the driving forces. So thank you for that. If the group wasn't that large and we had more time, I would then pick on a few comments to have some more feedback from you guys, but we need to move forward. So the case for transformation, why are we doing this? We heard some of it from our poll feedback, that there's just a culture of moving forward, there's comfort with that. So smart occupancy, what in the world is it? You've heard this new term, it's kind of emerging in the workplace. We've worked very closely with AgilQuest as a strategic partner to come up with this working definition for GSA. For GSA, we're defining smart occupancy as a workplace strategy that maximizes workplace efficiency, workforce productivity, and organizational sustainability. It balances, that's the most important word here, balances freedom and flexibility with measurement and control through the implementation of innovative technologies and processes, resulting in proactively managed and highly efficient workplace. I promise this is the most words you'll see on a page throughout the presentation. So what in the world does this mean? It basically means is, how do you manage an employee who's in a modern world working in multiple places? They're going to be in their primary office, they're going to be travel, regional offices, the third place is the cafe, the airplane, they're going to be at home. And most importantly, when you look at space as a resource, which is a limited resource in the primary office, when employees are elsewhere, how are you managing that? How are you balancing that flexibility and productivity with it? So some of the tools on it to make sure this works is you need to have a robust telework policy. You need to have a shared space design that opens up. So no private offices, for example, limited private desks. You don't own your space. You're sharing your space. You're tracking space utilization. Who's here, who's not, how much is this desk getting used? It's like the airlines. An airplane sitting empty on a tarmac is not making that airline any money. A desk sitting empty for a long period of time while that employee travels is costing the organization funds on both environmental and financial. You need mobile cloud-based technologies to support it and integrated smart building technologies to talk with the occupancy. What I love about mobility and smart occupancy is it opens the conversation on a whole bunch of stuff. Space is a limited resource when we start looking at that. Entitlement. People have worked for years for that corner office. Now we're saying the corner office isn't power, knowledge is power, knowing your network is power. How we change that conversation on entitlement. Employee trust is really great. Do we trust our employees? Performance planning and management, of course. That it reveals management issues. It doesn't create them. That's kind of the spin on it. Most importantly, we live in a mobile workforce. It's all around us. You can work from an airplane, mobile app, so it's in it. The change is here. But of course, we're government. So in a government environment, these are the driving forces that we have. We have the Telework Enhancement Act. We have requirement to consider alternative workspace arrangements. We have executive order to increase federal employment with individuals with disabilities. And most importantly, presidential memorandum disposing unneeded federal real estate. The point here is there's a lot of federal rules and regulations driving us to this. It's here and present. Now we need to figure out how we're going to implement all this, and that's where the Workplace Plus PMO is going to help. And of course, spending is going over revenue, and as many of us know, real estate is any organization's second largest cost. So this is one way to help curtail that by managing smart occupancy. So I'm going to pass it to my colleague Chuck here to talk. He's with the Workplace Plus PMO from Chicago. So Chuck?
Some of these changes we're seeing, and what's happening is, as you can see from the 1900s as we work through 2010, the generations of office types. And you go back to the early days where you had the bullpens with the corner offices and everybody had their place in the 1900s and 1940s, and you moved into the 50s and 60s where you started to get the steel furniture, some functional planning, and things started to open up and move around a little bit. And then you move into the cube farms, what made Dilbert famous in the 70s and 80s, and that was seen as efficient, but most likely effective. And then you get in the 90s and the 2000s where you had the dot-coms. This was the take your dog to work kind of days and things like that, where innovation and excitement and difference really made the grade. Less hierarchy, a lot of flexibility, hoteling came into play. And then you get to 2010 and beyond, and we're starting to see how do you recruit and retain folks? How do you collaborate? That the office is a place for conversation and dialogue, not necessarily for that standalone heads down work. Mobility and distributed work became a player, and technology has enabled that far more than it did even 2 years ago. And if you look at the way technology has increased. The other thing to understand is not only do we have kind of the 4 generations of workplace out there, the workforce also has 5 generations at play. And so when you're looking and having those conversations with your folks, you really have to do a lot of validating questions as you talk to people to make sure that you understand where they're coming from, because the best laid out space with bad mechanical makes that space bad too. And so those kind of conversations need to occur. Next slide. And it's really a challenge as we have in business to match business growth with your physical space. It's always been that challenge. And what we're offering here is the ability to sever business growth from real estate growth and allow you to expand and contract your business as your missions change, as the environment changes, as the economy changes, and allow staff a choice to where and when they work. And it becomes all about choice and all about being able to manage with what you have and the resources you have. Next slide.
Thank you very much, Chuck. And you'll hear more from Chuck. He's the PBS lead on the Workplace Plus PMO in a little bit. One of the things I want to talk to you about is GSA's own internal 1800 F Street, and that its purpose is to serve as a national model. With the mantra of kind of GSA goes first, we wanted to show our federal agencies, given all those drivers and all those rules and requirements, that it is possible to do this, to maintain while maintaining productivity and so forth. So this is our headquarters. It hasn't been renovated for 100 years. This is an artistic rendition of what it will look like. And one of the things that we realized when designing this was the building wasn't renovated for 100 years. We got very, very lucky with funds from the American Recovery Act to piece this together. So in designing, in the work stuff, we have to realize, we have to think, are we planning for the next 100 years? But it may not be another 100 years until this building is touched again. So a lot of the stuff we're pushing for here is thinking that long term of a vision. So hopefully many of you have visited this. It's right in DC. So the way we've made the case for what we're doing also is to demonstrate real estate savings and costs. So what we're doing is we're taking 2 other properties right now with a potential of a third and combining it into one. So we're basically taking a building, which you see here all the way to the left, 1800 F Street, and we're not renewing the lease in our Crystal City one, which is in Virginia, and in our Willow Woods one, which is also in Virginia. And we're basically consolidating it all into 1800 F. So we're taking 2,200 people, give or take, and we're going to put in now 3,500 people. We're also playing with our National Capital Region, which is our 4th office here in DC, and also adding that. So we will more than double occupancy. So there is real estate and environmental savings here to help drive the case for why these investments make sense. So we're basically going to a 2-to-1 desk sharing ratio. And it's for the enterprise. Again, this is from our swing space while our building gets renovated. You know, which gave us a great opportunity to pilot some of our ideas. You can see from the far left these open office spaces, sitting areas, collaborative. The right, upper right, that is our administrative office, or the equivalent of a secretary for our Canadian friends, for GSA as an administrator. The administrator moved out of the big ceremonial type offices and put himself in the similar space that the employees are in, a shared and collaborative space. The idea here is you have to have leadership buy-in. Our administrator also, for example, is driving around in a hybrid vehicle out of the big Lincoln Town car. Leaders have to mirror that, and you need that buy-in. Bottom left, you see kind of offices with glasses, so light permits, and our collaborative video room, which is where we are right now. We're not alone. This is not just kind of GSAs going off the deep end here. This is a lot of other organizations are doing it. This is Mayor Bloomberg's office in DC. Very similar notion. The executive has immersed himself in and around his staff in an open setting and so forth. And again, here with the money and save, so this is 1800F alone. What we're saying is, if we say cost without smart occupancy, this is if we provided 4,500 workspaces for 4,500 employees, the traditional model, it would cost us 63,000, well, you see the amount there, 63 million, to operate it. And in energy, 36 million kilowatt hours, and in carbon, 36,000 metric tons. With smart occupancy, you can see the savings delta there. We have a savings delta of $35 million, 20 million kilowatt hours, and 20,000 metric tons of CO2. Just by making sure that that resource doesn't sit empty. And how do we make sure that resource doesn't sit empty? We have robust telework, we have IT technology, and we use a hoteling software from AgilQuest, for example. Again, the financial case. Robust telework policy, one of the biggest things we've said here is we removed the notion of a schedule. We didn't say Monday is your telework day or Friday is your telework day. We're telling employees telework when it makes sense for you. Because Friday I may have to come in, but Tuesday I may not. The slang I like to say is you come in to collaborate, you go home to do, and you come back in to validate. And we also use technologies, so you can see people use boards, but we also our scheduling, our calendaring is open to the enterprise. So you just put in there teleworking today with contact information. And we've moved to the cloud. You know, this is we use a Google platform, but we also use a Cisco smartphone. So the phone number goes with you anywhere in the world. I could be sitting anywhere globally. I can visit my friends in Canada that are on this call, and my desk line, when connected to the VPN, will ring as if I was sitting in Washington, D.C. We also have integrated chat, and in the chat, you could put your status. I'm teleworking today. This is how best to reach me. These are all the culture pieces that we're injecting along with our technologies. And of course, we have onboard, we call it Book It, to help manage our actual space to make sure that that space does not sit empty. And then, of course, we're also integrating this Steelcase Room Wizard devices outside the conference rooms, which talks to AgilQuest, so we'll know that room is available, when's available, who's there. What I love about this room is you see it's also collaborative design. The walls are all whiteboards. So it's a design from top to bottom. Also, one of the things we're pushing the envelope on is integration between actual occupancy in the building, smart building technologies. Many buildings have smart building technologies. Now we're trying to connect the smart occupancy piece. A classic example is, many of you have turnstiles at your gate when you enter or exit a building. What happens when you would badge into that gate? It acknowledges you're there for security sense, but what if it also sent a message to the Book It or the reservation system to say you are here to check you into your first workstation? That's what we mean by integrating of the technologies. Lighting could be next, and so on and so forth. Putting out a lot of guidance document. Here's one, tips and tricks on mobile toolkit we give to managers and employees. This is a new document we're drafting right now. These are our health rules. How are we going to live in this shared environment? Kind of laying out the protocols. This is all part of the change management piece. Now there. Classic example, this is from the first page. You turn that book over, it's the golden rule. Basically, if we're going to go to a shared environment where you don't own your property, you have to do unto others as you would have done to yourself. You have to be cognizant of that and polite, clean up a workstation, and so forth. It also lays out all the nitty-gritty, which you can see on the right. For example, you can reserve a workstation up to 14 days in advance. You may only have one active one, so on and so forth. All those kind of business rules that we spend some time collaboratively setting. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague here, Bob Stafford, who's going to talk a little bit more about the design of 1800F. Bob?
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, this is Bob Stafford. I'm the Tenant Solutions Director in charge of the team that is moving, as Tony mentioned before, moving all of the GSA headquarters functions from their various locations in the Washington, D.C. area back into our transformed 1800F building. You know, one of the things when we were planning how this was going to work, and when you think of the concept of basically moving about 4,000 people into a building where we're really only providing roughly around 2,100 actual workstations for them to work, you really have to rethink what you're talking about when you're talking about the workplace, and think about it from a proactively managed type environment as opposed to what we've done in the past, which is just sort of provide space and whatever happens in that space happens. So a couple of the concepts that we used in planning of in planning the building and anticipating sort of this move from a sort of an owned space to sort of a space as a shared amenity was, number one, the fundamental component of the spatial layout is the hub with supporting shared space. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but basically we go from, say, for instance, a traditional model where one organization might have an entire floor or be associated with 35 seats or a certain suite of rooms to really this hub location being basically the organization's front door, and all of the other supporting space is really shared space for the entire enterprise, and not just like, hey, only people from, say, the CIO can sit in this area, or only people from my team can sit in this area. You have the ability to sit or utilize the workspace depending on what your needs are on a given day. Providing a variety of work settings based on employee presence and mobility profiles. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second too, but basically we had a conversation with all of our management, and we got feedback from our employees about how they work today and how they intend to work in the future, and then tried to provide workspaces within this building framework to accommodate those different types of work. And that variety of work settings is going to make this an extremely flexible and dynamic building as far as an operational and occupancy standpoint. And the last piece, spaces include non-assigned and a small percentage of assigned open and enclosed workspaces. This was sort of a really big change in how we were viewing the workplace, in that we were only looking at assigning actual workstations based on there being a functional need to do so. So the concept of hierarchy, I've been with the organization for 30 years, so I deserve a desk. I'm in 5 days a week, so I should get a desk. We really sort of turned that on its head and said that only a small percentage would be assigned based on function, and the rest would be shared and unassigned. So I talked about having a conversation with our workforce about how they work and what they do today and how they expect to work in the future. What that allowed us to do is sort of group them into sort of a number of work patterns, which varied from people that did their work, which were very sort of in the top left corner, desk-bound and concentrative, so they are at their desk doing a lot of heads-down work, number crunching, things of that nature, all the way to the bottom right, which was more interactive and externally mobile, where you have people that are going out visiting clients, on the road quite a bit, very mobile. We had a very wide range of employees that fit all of these different work patterns. And so when we were creating, again, that flexible framework in the building, we tried to make sure that we accommodated all those types of work either in the building and then through our IT network and all the other amenities that we're providing as part of the GSA approach to the workplace, allowing them to do that type of work wherever they needed to do it, whenever they needed to do it. So just to give you an example, we were talking about those hubs as organizational front doors. This is the actual floor plan of 1800F. 7th floor, and those lettered dots that you see there are hub locations for the different organizations, for several different organizations we have in GSA. So basically, you're going to be able to, when we first started thinking about this building, we said, well, hey, how if we do just all free address and there's no really set space for everyone? And then we quickly realized that people need, if they're coming to the building, they're new, or even if they're in GSA anyway and they need to interact with an organization, get information from them, find the head of that organization, they need a place to go to do that. So basically these dots represent hubs that act as the front door for those organizations. So for instance, Z, shown there on the far right of the plan, is our communications folks. So if somebody needs to go find the head of communications, they know that they can go to this hub, contact somebody there, and they can get them the information they need or point them in the direction they need to go to access those services of the people associated with that organization.
Can I just highlight real quick the public help part? That's a really critical new piece. That's our floor manager area. So every floor, to help with kind of the moving around, is going to have a floor manager. Think of it as a concierge. That's not the term we're using. It's a floor manager. This comes into key, especially, let's say you have a group of interns that have reserved a room, and they approach the room and a bunch of executives are still in it because their meeting ran over. Those interns may not feel comfortable saying, excuse me, we have this room now, even though they technically are entitled to do so. So they can go to the floor manager, and that person is empowered to go there and say, I'm sorry, Senior Vice President so-and-so, at this point, your conference room is already reserved for someone else. I've found a different space for you. Would you be willing to move there, or so on and so forth?
Or far more likely, find another place for the intern.
Or find another place for the intern. The point is, there's a human connection to help manage this as well.
And that proactive, we talked about proactively managed space, and that is one of the key factors to this. That, again, because of the dynamic nature of this space and all the innovations that we're putting in place, we know that we're going to need people to sort of help the organization adapt to that type of environment, and those people are there to do that. And this is an example of when I talked about these hubs. What you're looking at is a typical sort of workstation layout that's going to exist throughout the building. The hub there is sort of highlighted in dots, and there are like 3 or 4 different types of hubs. But basically, this is an example of a community hub. So an organization, we talk to each organization in GSA and ask them, based on how you do your work and how you see yourself occupying 1800F, what type of hub do you want? And for those that wanted community hubs, they said that, we want a place to be able to have people go to, collaborate, make that part of our business process that happens in the building. So, we've designed the layout that way. But as you see, these can be slightly different configurations. This is all flexible furniture and all highly configurable. So if in a year and a half they decide, you know what, I don't want this type of hub, I want some other type of hub, changing it out doesn't require 20 different people and bringing a vendor in to do it. It can easily be modified or changed almost overnight.
Thank you, Bob. So the headlines there are, the front door approach to your hub, the floor manager, and the ability that it's flexible and movable. So with that, and I just want to do a time check for everyone. We got about another, 8 to 10 minutes of conversation, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So we're just about on time, and we're happy to stay a little bit past 1 as well. So I'm going to pass it to my colleague Sharon Wall, who's over in Boston with Federal Acquisition Services. Sharon?
Thank you, Tony. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon and to be able to tell about GSA's story and journey. And prior to leading the federal acquisition side of the workplace PMO, I had led GSA's telework PMO with the signing of the Telework Enhancement Act. And with that, working with agencies and beginning to see some of the difficulties and the struggles that they were having in terms of implementing some of the things that GSA was in the process of implementing for itself. And with that, with the Workplace Plus Program Management Office, it's a perfect blend of our public building service. My team member, Chuck Hardy, and I come together and provide a holistic approach to looking at individual space requirements, looking at agencies' needs, helping to identify the specific work patterns of your agency, and creating that kind of a flexible work environment that works for your mission, that works for the scenarios that you see happening within your own organizations. It's basically applying the best practices that we have come to know across the country through our living labs at 18th and F, but also projects that have spawned across the country, implementing these types of workplaces. And our goal, as Tony indicated earlier, is that GSA goes first. We create a lab environment so that we can test out, determine what worked, why did it work, why didn't it work, so that we can help our customer agencies perhaps not duplicate the same issues, or we can share with them from a technology perspective, from a space perspective, from a change management. It's essentially looking at everything holistically that has to go into a successful implementation. One of the largest factors, as Chuck pointed out, are the individuals in the workplace, the traditionalists, the boomers, the Gen X, Gen Y, the millennials, post 9/11 generation, all learn differently, all embrace technology differently, all have different affiliation needs. And so it's taking into account all of those factors as you begin this journey of building a transformed workplace. Next slide, please. So the approach that we take, again, is, previous to this, you had space and your workforce adapted to the space, as opposed to looking at it from how does the workplace complement and support and enhance the work being performed. So again, it's about alignment, and it's about building that strong business case for change. It's important from the standpoint of establishing the dialogue between management and employees, management and labor. You're not going to be successful in one of these endeavors if you haven't, begun a dialogue with labor as to in a pre-decisional environment. And GSA has been very effective in that area. And we can share with you how we have been effective in working and essentially fulfilling our labor obligations. And it's about most importantly, the important information technology solutions. In speaking with agencies across the country, I would find that they're still tethered with tower computers. They don't have a robust telework policy. They don't have flexible work arrangements. And so consequently, it's meeting that agency in the stage of where they are in their journey. It is absolutely crucial in this process, to have the executive sponsorship, that they can have that vision and mission in their forefront and be able to communicate that with the workforce and lead by example, which is absolutely critical to the success of a transformation. When I was leading the telework PMO, GSA received awards for telework innovation, but what was most telling, and this was through GITRA, it was for workforce transformation, because as we approach this, it's really important to recognize the agility that we're giving our workforce, their ability to essentially work from anywhere and continue to be as highly effective and productive as possible. One of the great numbers that our telework dashboard captures is the amount of administrative leave avoided as a result of GSA's ability to have its employees working from anywhere. And during the recent Hurricane Sandy, we had employees working out of Starbucks and the library because of their enhanced skills, their ability to work from anywhere, and they were restoring customers such as the Department of Justice who had lost their capability. So it's important to increase awareness of the key objectives and to maintain active, effective communications. Change management is first and foremost. So we have a team of mobility specialists trained across the country, working in cooperation and collaboration with our PBS workplace executives to bring to the agencies a blended and integrated and holistic approach to their space needs. And again, it's about, when we talk about the change management aspect of it, it's making sure that the employees are part of this process, that it's not done to them, but done with them, and in fact that they are part of it and they're taking ownership of it, and that they're brought along from the very, very beginning and right through to continuously gaining that feedback in terms of what's working and what isn't. So again, from a workplace discovery, desired outputs, what you want to understand is how you're going to measure that workforce effectiveness and performance. You're not measuring performance based upon attendance or presence. It's with results and outcomes. You're going to be able to enhance the collaboration of various groups, not unlike what the private sector is already seeing in some of their experiments in terms of shared space and occupancy. It's going to change the organizational culture. It's going to foster the mobility, agility, and adaptability of your workforce. To date, and a very conservative figure, GSA has avoided $1.5 million in administrative leave by creating a workforce that essentially has the skills to be able to work from anywhere and is installed when a building is unable to be occupied or we have an event that prevents people from getting on the road safely. It's creating the work profiles, looking at space utilization, ensuring that the employee satisfaction with what's created, creating more of the we space and less of the me space, and understanding the adjacencies. So it's the key considerations we look at are access, and then time and budget. And we're all faced with constrained budgets, so we're looking at the opportunities that this presents to reduce the overall cost of our space ownership.
So this is Chuck again, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the diagnostics of the processes, but I'll bring you home too, because I'll talk about the analytics, and I'm going to go into kind of the education piece and then close it out with the ROI. And on diagnostics, as Sharon just mentioned, we're focused on that access, time, and budget, but it's a top-down conversation and a bottom-up conversation. We want to engage the entire workforce in understanding how that works. It becomes more of a mass customization and a synchronization rather than a standardization or or a one-size-fits-all, and it's different for each organization, and the conversation has to occur. We do intake surveys, we do post surveys, we do ongoing surveys, and we'll do focus groups. There's hundreds of different ways that we're looking to collect that information to make sure that we have the pulse of that organization and truly understand the operation. Next slide. And then as we gather this, that education piece is critical, not only educating our own folks, but educating externally to the federal workforce. And so we've got numerous publications out, not only on acoustics, on mobility, we've got videos on managing distributed workforces, and innovative work practices, benchmarking guidelines on space allocation, circulation patterns. You name it, we're gathering that information from the analytics, from the implemented workplace engagements we're doing, and then we're putting out publications to share broadly with the workplace community beyond GSA. And then finally, next slide. And we also had the website was on that too, which you'll get with the slide deck. The current engagements we're doing, and this is just a handful, but it really is bringing it home through the return on investment, that the reduction in space is bringing home the money so it can go more toward mission and more toward people and less toward real estate. Again, being able to deal in the times we're dealing with in an effective way. And GSA has been set up within the federal government where we do have the folks, the people to assist agencies in making this happen for their organizations. As Sharon and Bob mentioned, and Tony, that we've done a lot of learning on ourselves. We want to share those lessons with you all and be able to say, we tried it here, it might work for your organization, want to come over, take a look at it and see what's going on, and share those stories. So when you're implementing it for your operations, you have the greatest chance of success and you've managed your risk the best. And so that's kind of, bottom line is, at the end of the day, it's all about how does this make sense for business, and this is one of those slides. And with that, I think we go to questions now, right, Tony?
Yes, and I just want to thank everyone for listening. We were very, very excited to share all this information, so I apologize if this is a little bit of a fire hose. We hope you found it of value, but we're right on schedule. We have about 15 minutes for questions. Again, we're happy to stay. I'm going to pass it to Doug, who's going to help us facilitate questions based on the ones put in. Correct, Doug?
Yeah, I'm happy to take some questions now. You're right. That was an amazing amount of information, and we've had a bunch of questions already about, is the slide deck going to be available? The answer is yes. It's actually going to be available as a recording. So those of you who want to go back and look at something or share it with somebody else, I believe those emails with the link will be going out sometime tomorrow. Now is the time to use the Q&A facility in your WebEx desktop. Please just type in your questions there. We will answer as many of them as we have time for. We've actually got quite a few questions already, so be sure to get yours in quickly so it makes it to the top of the queue. The very first question we have here actually came early on, and the question is, what do you say to the detractors of mobility when they bring up the Yahoo CEO change and trying to bring employees back to the office from home and other locations?
I'd be happy to take that question. I think that if you look at the Yahoo situation, I think you see that it is a particular point in time relative to the need for that CEO to address a organizational situation and to increase the performance, and it's an approach. And I honestly, having led virtual teams from across the country for the past multiple years, I would say that the most important way to overcome the issues with performance and the position taken relative to, well, if I don't see people, how do I know that they're working? The question then is posed back to them to say, well, how do you know they're working when they're in the building? What is it that you have determined that they are supposed to be delivering to your organization? How does their work fit into the overall mission? And so the way that you overcome that type of a barrier, what you do is you have very well-defined performance plans and performance objectives that are based upon outcomes and results rather than left in a manner that does not it does not lend itself to quantifying. I would say that most agencies are able to quantify their mission and what it is they're expected to deliver to the American people, or as private sector organizations have done this successfully for years. And one of the most interesting studies in working with AT&T has actually correlated between their performance appraisal system, their remote workers, and their on-site workers. And in fact, they have determined that the people who work remotely have achieved higher results from a performance appraisal perspective than their traditional in-the-office worker. And so I think that the obligation and the challenge is for management to truly quantify what it is they want as outcomes and results from their workforce.
The other thing, too, and I'll just chime in for a couple seconds, is I'm kind of thankful to Yahoo for teeing up the conversation, because it really points toward the criticalness of understanding employees' work patterns, as Bob mentioned, the concentrative and the interactive. And it also speaks to Yahoo's going through some turmoil, and they do have kind of culture issues, and creating that workspace that you want people to come to the office for a reason, to be collaborative, to be part of that culture, and they're doing it a little heavy-handed, but it may fit for where they are at today, and every operation is a little different. You have to, again, get into your operations, understand your operations, and then make your workspace work for it.
Next question, what do you got queued up for us?
Let's see, are the limited number of assigned stations carved out of the hub or carved out of the shared space?
That's a good question, and actually we're leaving that up to the organizational leaders to determine where their assigned spaces are. We have a feeling that there's going to be almost every organization is going to want to have at least a certain percentage of their assigned seats, and again, we're talking some organizations as little as like 4 or 5. Located near the hub, say it's their chief administrative person or something like that, to sort of quote-unquote man that front door. But we're feeling that some organizations are going to want to have all of their assigned seats around the hub, and others are going to want to maybe distribute them, especially for organizations that maybe occupy a floor by themselves, might want to distribute those assigned seats in a different way. And we're allowing these organizational leaders to make that determination themselves based on their knowledge of how their workers work and what business needs they want to achieve.
I think another question here along those same lines is, do we have to move out of the space to convert to this structure of workspace? We are currently housed in multiple buildings of the DC area. How would that affect us?
I think the answer to that is not necessarily. I mean, obviously each client and each situation is totally different, and you sort of have to do an evaluation of what the different drivers are and maybe hindrances are to what you want to achieve. But we've had in some of the, Chuck and Sharon mentioned these labs that we've done in GSA. We've done some in 1800F. We've done others in regional offices throughout the country, sort of trying this whole concept out on ourselves, where they've done over the course of a weekend just a reconfiguration of existing space, not increasing or reducing the square footage necessarily, but turning, for instance, say a bay of space that used to only house 8 people into a place that now has 24 smaller workstations, and then seeing how that works, working with the different technologies and the different sort of protocols associated with changing that space to sort of see what worked, what didn't, and then look at how we might be able to apply that on a larger scale. So certainly we talked about the monetary benefits and the environmental benefits of reducing square footage, and that is really something that we are shooting for in our 1800F transformation. But from a client standpoint, or if you're thinking about this from your own organizational standpoint, and certainly the Workplus PMO can assist you with sort of thinking through the different factors, there's no reason why you can't occupy the space that you're in now and still adopt some of the concepts or approaches we've talked about.
Right.
And if I can add to that, go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, and what's most important is in that that the workplace approach is going to intersect with your agency at what point in the journey that you are. And so we're able to address things in a modular fashion, as Bob indicated, and to perhaps stage a particular area within your building. And then what's a very important piece of this is then you allow your employees to rotate through it, become acclimated to it, provide you feedback in terms of what's working for them, what isn't. If all of their files are paper-based, how do we digitize and put together a process to digitize your files so that your employees have access to those files regardless of where they are? So again, it's the notion here is it's not one size fits all. It's for us to be able to come together, to listen to where you are, and to be able to consult and advise you in terms of helping you to put together a plan based upon what stage of this transformation you're in.
Excellent. The next question we have here is on the service side. Are there employee services you're exploring to support the employees?
Well,
go ahead, Sharon.
In terms of employee services, one of the things that we had to have our finger on the pulse of is the service and support provided with the technology. As we become much more mobile, the focus on those mobile technologies, their reliability and ability to support our employees, it becomes even more heightened. And so it's how your IT is configured and aligned, and the support organizations providing those services so that there is a fundamental shift from supporting IT in a traditional office setting to now supporting the entire workforce. So it's not a situation where the employee support services are simply, well, there's a higher degree of service level expectation within in the building. It has to be modified so that the level of support for the technology is equally focused on that mobile worker that is now perhaps hoteling or teleworking a couple of days or is at a client location. It becomes all the more important that that service is as robust as it needs to be.
And then in particular to the 1800F project, I mean, aside from the IT support, I mean, we did, one of the ways that we are realizing some significant savings as part of this sort of consolidation back into 1800F is basic tenant support services like centralized supply. We talked about the sort of floor manager support piece, other services associated that you would expect in a building. We've sort of looked at ways to make that level of delivery more efficient. So by bringing, for instance, FAS, PBS, and the central office functions of GSA back into one building, we were able to eliminate probably like 8 or 10 different ways of managing supplies, ordering supplies, making it much more of an efficient system, but also with an eye on making sure that we were thinking about how the tenants would be occupying the building and utilizing those services and tailoring what may have been a traditional approach to some of these things to a much more mobile workforce.
And that's one thing just to keep in mind on services in general is you're trying to make sure that you're addressing things the leanest possible way and addressing the employees' base needs of what they need to do their jobs and how do they do it. So the centralized filing, the digitization, the other services that come with this are focused both on the ease of the employee doing their work and also how, as it relates to space and the technology we have to do these things.
Right, and the other thing to bear in mind is your unions are going to be very focused on the employee reaction to this, engaging labor and the employees so that there is that buy-in and that you don't have to deal with arbitrating issues down the road. If they feel as though the employees' needs are being addressed and met along this journey together, it makes for a much successful implementation by taking all of that feedback into account.
And that goes with the surveys that we send out to folks who coordinate those with the unions, and it really is set up nicely that we're now asking, because it's part of the program, is to say, what do you need to do your job? and that's what we want to provide folks. And so there isn't this, again, this cookie cutter approach. It's really listening to the employee base, finding out what's needed, finding out how people work, and that aligns very well with the mission of the unions that we deal with.
Excellent. We're actually hitting the 1 o'clock point just about now, and we've got a couple dozen questions keyed up here. So I'm going to ask the panelists to stay on if they can. We're going to answer as many of these questions as we have time for. We're also going to get the rest of these questions answered and provide them, so everybody just watch for an email announcing where those answers are going to show up. The next one here is very interesting. When you very first started this initiative, these workplace changes, how many internal resources did you dedicate to the project?
I think that varied depending on where we were within the organization. It's a very unique situation for a lot of different reasons on the 1800F project, where we have, for instance, say the PBS branch of our organization remained in the building while the renovation was taking place. The central office organizations moved to swing space in a leased building here in Noma, just north of Union Station in DC. And FAS was principally located across the river in Crystal City and out in Fairfax, Virginia, and they didn't go through any sort of move or transition at all. So as far as, you know, when the decisions were being made about how this was going to work, there was some real sort of internal analysis of what needed to be done to move the different parts of this organization along this path of you know, being ready for this significant change and allocating the proper level of resources to that. So for instance, you know, we set up a network within the entire community, tenant community that was moving back in, and we called them change champions, who would be able to communicate with the various business groups, sort of be the point of contact, go-to source of information at sort of a localized level for people, so that they would have somebody they would know that they could talk to about questions or concerns about the project. But then, for instance, our FAS component put together an entire separate PMO to really get the level of change management going within that organization that they feel was needed to be able to transition the workforce from thinking the way they had in the past to really moving along this line of the new way of working. So it's really, you know, going back to, I think, something Chuck said about understanding your workforce, understanding that you can't treat it as from a cookie cutter approach. And once you understand kind of where your workforce is along this continuum, you can start to make decisions about, do I need to set up a whole separate organization and contract to assist with this? Do we have enough resources in-house to be able to do it? Do I just need a team of 3 or 4 people really to manage this? It's something which you just really need to understand kind of where you are along that continuum, where you are in that timeline, so that you can determine internally what the resources are required to sort of implement this type of change.
And the other thing is, as you look from project to program, organizationally, we GSA have gone across the country and have created an internal network of workplace strategists, both from the infrastructure side as well as the IT and furniture side, that have come together that kind of broadens that messaging, the coverage, the education, the analytics, and everything else that's going on. So there's a little bit of consistency around what's being discussed and a little bit of understanding, but also it creates a feedback loop for the lessons that are being learned, because as Tony showed that adaption curve of the where we're at and everything else, we are undergoing change. We're putting in place something new, and so you really need not only the key players in whether it be a project or a program, but those other resources out there and those feedback loops that you can tap into to make sure that we're learning and failing forward, if you will.
Let me add something. Sharon mentioned this earlier. This is a multi-pronged. This is really about transforming all of GSA. It's about creating a workforce for the 21st century. So and what's fascinating, what gets me out of bed every day with this topic is how the space design and the technology affects the workplace behaviors such as collaboration, innovation, that any corporation or government sector would want. So Sharon and I started 2 years ago only focusing on telework, but we realized there needed to be a robust understanding of mobility and telework practices, squashing the notion of a schedule, for example, having those hard conversations about the degree of trust of employees, managing not by line of sight, by work outcomes, very much in the way a consulting model would be. So there were, meanwhile, while Sharon and I were in that space, Bob and the construction team, they were working on the design space. So it was multi-tiered. So I'd encourage, change management is a big piece of that. There's technology, there's people, there's design, there's behaviors, there's performance management. It's a nice umbrella topic. It's a good pull metric, if you will. Doug, one of the things I noticed was there was a question about the telework dashboard. I just wanted to show it real quick. Whoops, and I'm showing that. I don't know why I'm showing that. There. So this is it, just an FYI, and Sharon could speak more to it. But basically, it's pulling from our time card system. People were always putting in their telework, and the way it used to be, it used to auto-populate depending on the schedule. So we removed that and said to people, put in when you telework, and it allows us to see what organizations are more mobile versus other, which then helps Bob with the space design. How much hub space does a place need, depending on their current? And now you layer that on top of AgilQuest data that we capture from actual reservations. Then we have the amount of time people say they're out of the office, the amount of time we're saying people are in the office. This is all very powerful data that we could use in aiding the design.
So I assume that this is also helping you determine candidates for which one of the workplace work pattern style profiles. Is that true?
Well, yes, it is true, but the other piece that this was intended to do was it created visibility across the country, because we knew that there was pockets of resistance. That feedback would come to us to say, okay, if I'm a contracting officer in the New England region, I can telework, but if I'm in Region 9, which is out on the West Coast, I can't. And so transparency, there was a great deal of focus on creating a transparent environment where the information is out there and available, because that kind of transparency drives behavior. This is actually, we're getting ready to relaunch it with refreshed data, because we have Telework Week coming up actually next week. And we're encouraging not only GSA, but our customer agencies across the country to come to workshops that are being hosted across the country. Actually, we've got a workshop that we're doing here in New England where agencies are going to be invited to come in via WebEx or physically come into our space, where we'll have teams talking about the tools of mobility, how they work mobily, how the space supports their the work that they do in terms of this newly designed workplace that is very sustainable, using sustainable resources, and it was qualified as a LEED's Gold office environment in its redesigned phase. So again, it supports all of the executive initiatives, and what we hope to do is to demonstrate it and to welcome agencies to come in and experience the GSA story. But the telework dashboard is intended to measure progress. It also would measure the amount of greenhouse gas avoided as a result of the numbers of days teleworked. And so number of different measures to put out in front of the organization to kind of help with the cultural change necessary to make this successful.
And the one key piece as we talk about telework, that's the high octane that allows you to start maximizing desk sharing, start really leveraging the distributed workforce that work today demands, kind of thing. And so as that comes into your organizations, it's leveraging that gets you the best and highest use of where we're at around workplace.
And GSA's goal has been to share everything that we've developed with to the benefit of the rest of government. The Telework Enhancement Act actually gives us that role. And so our forward-leaning policy is posted on our gsa.gov website under telework. We have many white papers, collateral, and we would offer you to go to that website and take advantage of the materials there. And in addition, the Workplace Plus PMO will be launching our internal website with all of our collateral and reference material and tools in the month of March. And so please look for that. You'll be able to see all of the information and tools and tutorials that we've created, making those available widely to the
She meant
federal
to say,
community.
yeah, it's going to be an external website, not an internal one. We're doing an internal one where we're sharing information, but then we're also, as Sharon just mentioned, going external with it. In a month we'll be sharing it.
Very good, and we'll be happy to include that with the answers if the URL is available already. It looks like we've got time for perhaps 2 more questions here. The next one I want to jump to here is a great question. How critical do you think the software, the hoteling software, the dashboard is to the success of workplace consolidation? Can you do it without software?
I would say that in order to optimize the space utilization, I think that having a software application such as AgilQuest is absolutely critical to the optimally using your space, so that you truly are changing behaviors and having individuals think consciously about the space that they require. Otherwise, what we see is, kind of a spotty approach and empty workstations, which again is not going to result in the most efficient utilization of your space.
And just managing of expectations. I mean, we started out with the airline example, and would an airline or a hotel think of ever not doing something without a reservation or a management system of their space? It just makes sense to do it that way. And from an employee perspective, that predictability or that assurance is something that allows them to do their business in an efficient way as well.
And in addition to that, I mean, it's in addition to sort of proactively managing the workplace and how it works on a day-to-day basis, being able to capture how it is utilized on a day-to-day basis so that you can understand through, whatever capabilities the system might have of, how many reservations are being made on a day-to-day basis, where those reservations are, so that you can make some real data-based decisions about how you manage your workplace. Again, I think, the traditional approach has been that you look at how many people you have. There's some sort of formula that equates to amount of square footage. You get that amount of square footage, and then you go along from there. And what we're talking about is really understanding how on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, in 1800F, the workplace is being utilized so that we can make intelligent decisions about, do we want to change the configuration of this area, or do we want to make this area more dense than it currently is because this is very popular and a very popular place for people to go. I think that's another critical piece, that having some sort of software system associated with managing the workplace gives you.
And I'd like to add, we've kind of laid out this, we're very fortunate. Again, the Recovery Act came in, we had this project ready. It was, shovel ready, as they say, so we were able to get that. But you don't have, like Sharon mentioned the regional projects, it doesn't have to be a complete overhaul. You could start by shutting down a floor for a day and seeing what happens. You could start by telling people that currently telework, why don't you desk share? Why don't each of you give up your current desk, find a buddy in the building, and coordinate and desk share, just 2 to 2 or 3 to 2, 3 to 1, if you will, with a friend. That doesn't require a reservation system. That just requires collaboration amongst those 3 friends. And the last thing I'd encourage you all to do is look at Telework Week. It's a really kind of a big, if you go look at the Telework Exchange, it's a nonprofit organization, I believe. They provide a lot of resources on how to craft kind of a Telework Week. We used that as our launch pad 3 years ago. To kind of push the organization, and we closed down floors and buildings and so forth. So you don't have to do the complete overhaul. One more question, Doug?
We've got so many questions here. I'm going to jump to one that seems to be fairly contentious, and we'd love to have somebody jump in on this. As far as unions and space allocation, have you had to negotiate in order to allow desk sharing and unassigned spaces? Do you have any specific and of course brief advice for these 2 areas?
Right. Yes, I think that what's important is, yes, we negotiated with the unions on the policy changes we were making. The foundational building block that we established was that in our telework policy of 2010, we introduced the notion that if you telework 3 days a week or more, you may be required to hotel. That was kind of setting the stage, and the union embraced and adopted that because they saw mobility as a very good thing in terms of providing that level of flexibility. But the way to ensure success in working with your fulfilling your labor obligations is, really meeting the pre-decisional requirement to get them involved, to tell them what you're thinking, to lay out the benefits, and then ask them how would they make that better. And then, conducting it in such a way that you're doing knowledge capture in your meetings, you're basically feeding back to them what you've agreed to, you're providing them information ahead of time. The pitfall that I see agencies make is that they think that they can do this without satisfying those labor obligations, and that's when they get themselves into trouble. And so I think that if they feel as though they're part of that process, I can't guarantee, but if they're part of the process, because it is a change in working conditions and they have the right to essentially negotiate that on behalf of their bargaining units. So lessons learned, it's a respectful relationship. You expect that going in, and if it isn't, you address that as well. We had some adversarial conversations, and we basically brought it to the attention of their union nationwide, and the participants who were party to it were eventually changed. So as long as there is a good faith effort put forward, I think that you're going to see success in the results you achieve.
The other thing there is, it has to be a conversation, and just like we're having this educational briefing here for you all, we did the same thing with our unions. We let them know what workplace means and what is happening in the current times. Having that conversation with them, we engaged them in the development of the surveys and found out they were as interested as we were in trying to find out what makes the office tick, kind of thing. And so it's those kind of conversations, and then it's taking it into reality of, walking them through space and showing them kind of open desks and nobody sitting there, or showing them two people of equal grades in the same job position, one with a completely empty desk and the other with piles of paper, and saying, those are two employees that are equally graded, same job, and I can tell you right now, if I offer that clean desk employee more technology for less desk, he'll probably take the more technology. And if I said the same to the other person, they'd want more desk. And so it really is catering to the person and how they work, and not necessarily, again, that one-size-fits-all that people in the past have kind of developed standards and conversations around. But that's a conversation, that's an education, and that's a partnership. And I think if you approach it that way, it can be very effective.
Absolutely, and the most important critical element is that leadership has to be all in. It can't be a situation where it's what I say, but I'm not modeling that behavior. They have to demonstrate that, in fact, they're taking the journey with their team and their employees, and that they're embracing the principles upon which that this transformation is occurring.
That's an awesome set of advice. It's very encouraging to hear that, in light of there's some real challenges out there. Well, we've come to what's probably the last of our time here. We want to really thank Sharon, Tony, Bob, and Chuck, everybody here on the call, and certainly those of us here at AgilQuest. You guys did a great job of developing and then preparing and delivering this for us today. The work that you guys are doing there at GSA is a great example, both within workplace and within government, so thanks again. Please, everybody, remember to check your inboxes for the webinar recording. We will work with the team here and get as many of those questions answered as possible, and also look for the March webinar announcement and the rest of this year's Workplace Leader Series. Well, until then, thanks again from all of us here at AgilQuest, and have an excellent afternoon.